A few weeks ago, a statement made by former President Obama, "Defund the police," is a snappy slogan, and it's a dumb thing to say for anyone legitimately seeking police reform. You've lost the big audience the minute you say it, which makes it a lot less likely that you're actually going to get the changes you want done. Growing up, I would often hear my dad, an immigrant from the island of Grenada in the West Indies, say this joke from back home. Everyone get mad at the police and mad at God, but as soon as something happening, they want to say, "Oh God, where the police?" We, as African American citizens, ask the questions like, why does it keep happening to us? Why do we not get a fair day in court? Why don't we get a jury of our peers? Tonight we learn about a group of retired FBI special agents. They are the 3E Group. They are a team of subject matter experts that developed an organization to address and strategically help transform how police entities protect and serve their respective communities. Sounds like retraining is the key. Good evening. Thank you again for tuning in. Tonight's guests consist of 3 retired federal agents, Eduardo C. Alford, Dr. Gerald Green, and Robert Elliott. They will help us learn why we need to retrain, not defund the police. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for appearing on the Median Society. It's definitely a great opportunity for the audience to get to learn what the 3E Group does and how you guys are going about trying to change the landscape, the mental landscape with law enforcement in America. We've had a very tough week, last week, and I want to talk a little bit about that and get your thoughts on it so our audience has an understanding of where law enforcement is coming from when it comes to the feeling of two Americas at this point. So let's start off by introducing yourselves. Donnie, Eddie, and Robert, you want to take some time and talk to our audience?
Absolutely. Ed, did you want me to go first? Or?
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, so I'm Donnie Green, and my law enforcement career started with a local agency here in Georgia, DeKalb County, Georgia Police, back in the late 80s. And then I was fortunate and blessed enough to be hired by the FBI in the early 90s, where I had a 21-year plus career. After retiring, I went back and I taught at the FBI Academy for almost 9 years. And so I have a little over 30 years of law enforcement experience. Prior to that, I was in the military for a few years. And so here I am, and I'm glad to be here. And before I go any further, thank you for having us on your show. We're honored to be here, and hopefully it's something that we'll say and impart to the audience will help them, maybe one day become an FBI agent as well.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Robert.
Hello again. My name is Robert Elliott. I'll give you a little bit about my background. I'm a product of an HBCU, St. Augustine's College. I left college and went right into the military as a military commissioned officer. I was a military intelligence officer for almost 10 years. And then after leaving the military, I was in the FBI for over 20-something years. My career in the military allowed me to have many varied leadership roles, such as a platoon leader of a ground surveillance radar platoon. I had company command in a military intelligence battalion, and also had some staff jobs, an intelligence staff job, and also I had a position where I was the logistics officer, which also controlled the military police on the military base in Germany. When I came into the Bureau, of course, having spent so much time in military intelligence, I decided I wanted to work more with the criminal side of it. So for many years, I worked criminal out of a small RA. And then later on, I became the applicant coordinator and recruiter for the Richmond Division. And in addition to that, I was also one of the assessors who went around assessing agents, potential candidates for the agent position. And from there, I went to headquarters. I went back into my first love, which was military intelligence. I went into the espionage unit, and learned a lot. I was a supervisor of the espionage unit, and I think I did well enough that they made me an instructor at the FBI Academy, the Counterintelligence Training Center, and I later became the actual unit chief of the unit Counterintelligence Training Center, and that's the unit that we actually train FBI agents to catch spies. So I have a good idea about training. I have a good idea about how to select candidates, the selection process, the background process. I have a large, vast amount of experience in leadership, and I also have a great understanding of how not only how to do training, but also how to manage training.
Awesome. And Eddie?
Yeah, so my name is Eduardo Alfred, and I started my law enforcement career kind of like, but Dr. Green did go to actually North Carolina, called North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. Worked there for a number of years and transitioned into the FBI in 1992. Idea of programs, and like Donnie and Robert, throughout those almost 30 years, in and out of training, doing community service, which kind of brought the three of us together with this Project 3E group. So I'll cede my time, Anthony, and then we'll get into the meat of what we want to talk about.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, January 6th and the white supremacy insurrection of the Capitol. It appears that at this point in America, a lot of African Americans are feeling that there are two Americas. What does that mean to you guys? How does that make you feel as professional law enforcement?
So I'll try to answer that question for you, Anthony.
Okay.
It puts us. It's a difficult. It's not just a one answer question. It's a very complicated question. We're finding out a lot more about people who participated in this protest and actually a terrorist act. Depending on how you look at it, and we're finding folks that not from all spectrums of life that attended. It's military folks or folks in law enforcement, executives, and it's very troubling. And you mentioned something that is quite true, and hopefully the president-elect can work to bring the country back together, because it's certainly divided.
Mm-hmm. And
it hasn't been a great 4 years. And it's starting off. It's ending with just turmoil that's affecting the country.
Okay,
that's my spin on it.
Gotcha.
And let me say also that we have, as a group, we have the utmost respect for the law enforcement officers who were at the Capitol that day, and those who came in later to protect the Capitol. They have a very tough job. They use extraordinary restraint, which in a sense also shows the divide or the disparity between two different Americas. But what I'd like to say now is that as we look at them, we know that everyone involved is going to look at and scrutinize everything that they've done, how they did it and why they did it. And that's what we're not here to do. We're here mm-hmm. to really talk about in general how things are going to be. The thing I would caution people is that when they see even the pictures on the videos from the event, remember that picture is a snapshot of a split second. Mm-hmm. And what is the context behind that picture? So again, our thing is that we have a lot of respect for the police. We have a lot of respect for law enforcement. And that is why we see the need for the change. Mm-hmm. We've been in it. We've been on the other side of it. We're African-American people, and we know that once we're out of the uniform, we're still African-American. Mm-hmm. So we understand how important the community was, and how the different protests were for the summer.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. So here's a pretty.
Anthony,
Eddie. Sure.
No. I was just going to make just a quick comment if we have time.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
You know what it really what it shows, Anthony, is the divide in this country. And if you set the law enforcement piece of it aside, you will understand that there are two justice systems. You know, one for people of color, and then one for non-people of color, right? So you have to take a look at the preparedness and the things that led up to how this particular group was able to reach the Capitol. And that really is the essence of one of the things that we want to talk about, and one of the things that we are looking at with this project that we're launching is the culture. Because you think about how the culture in this country allowed that, but in just several weeks before this event, you know, there was another group that protested, you know, rightfully so, had good reason to protest, and things were very, very different. So that really, honestly, Anthony, is the essence of what we want to address, is the culture of how things are in this country. And that really ties into law enforcement, and it ties into and relates to community relations. And then it also looks at the government, which also feeds into those two entities.
Okay. So that leads us into how, when you guys have a conversation with your counterparts that are white, what are some of the things that they say keeps them focused on how they treat African Americans compared to their own people?
Well, I will say that there are several types of people. There are people who will embrace new ideas, and they understand when they go into a situation that things can be different because they have to take their own biases out of it. Those people you don't have to worry about. If they make a mistake, those are the people that you want to retrain. Those are the people that can learn from different types of training, practical exercises to deal with the community. But what we're talking about is really much more simple. What we're talking about is treating people fairly, treating everyone fairly. So it really doesn't matter what your background is, where your bias is. If you go into a situation to treat people respectfully and fairly, but then there shouldn't be an issue. But we also recognize, and the FBI has recognized, and we can see from January the 6th, there are bad actors, white supremacists, there are motorcycle gangs, there are different outlaw or criminal elements that have infiltrated law enforcement throughout this country. And as a part of every organization, you're going to have that, but you have to be able to, one, recognize those people are within your organization and somehow weed them out, and use every tool that you have to weed them out. But first you have to recognize and understand that those people are within your organization.
Okay. So
yeah, that's an excellent point, Robert.
So you guys don't feel like, to some of our audience, do you feel like at some point it becomes like a lost cause trying to train these people, or you're sold on the fact that you can retrain?
Oh, no, certainly not. The people who want to do right are easily trained. I mean, you think about it. There are times when you've had, we are all a product of our own environment, where we came from. We pick up biases as we grow. And part of the pillars that President Obama made, one of the pillars is community policing, crime reduction. Police officers, if they understood who was in their community, because now every community is so diverse. If they understand the people in their community and understand that not every person they meet is a criminal, you cannot treat them like one size fits all. But then they will understand that I need to treat people with respect from the beginning, and how I act will affect how they respond. And those are some of the things that we look at doing practical exercise when we go out and do our coaching, to allow them to see and put themselves in an training environment that will allow them to work through not only their perception of the community, but to see how this community perception of them is and how it affects them doing their job.
Okay.
Yeah, Anthony, if I can just add to what Robert
Absolutely.
was saying as well, we want to teach police officers when they know they should be agile, and when they should pivot from being a warrior to a guardian, and then from a guardian back to a warrior. And it seems in a lot of incidents that's related to use of force that they do a good job at being a guardian, but they don't know when to. I'm sorry to be and being a warrior, but they don't know when to be a guardian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not true across the board, but we're seeing too much of it, and that's one of the things we want to work on is having a more of a guardian mentality. And it's quite simply, we don't believe that the current training, the curriculum in a lot of law enforcement agencies, not all, but a lot, you know, are meeting those standards. Mm-hmm. They are teaching and spending a lot more time on, you know, use of force and firearms, and not culture, as Eddie spoke so eloquently earlier about.
And then to and one of the things that we want to focus on is having the leadership in law enforcement identify those individuals, and it speaks to some of the training, you know, apparatuses that Dr. Green spoke about. You know, how different countries, you know, train better, but we also want to help police departments hire better, because there are bad police officers, there are bad airline pilots, there are bad employees at IBM. And a lot of those things, Anthony, comes from our life experiences. That's what makes us all different. My life experiences are different from Robert's. Robert's are different from Donnie's. Donnie's is different from the next guy. And we as a law enforcement culture have to tap into those things, even in the very early stages as we start to recruit the right types of individuals to be police officers. You know, you can be firm, but you can be kind. And there's a very thin line in law enforcement, because there are split-second decisions that have to be made. But a lot of us, we draw from our life experiences when we make those decisions. So that's why we think it's very important as our group that we also have these departments focus on the very initial stages of when they start to hire and bring these young men and women on. And because they come on with a lot of responsibility, they got a weapon, and they are able to make life and death situations. So that's one of the areas that we really want to focus on, is hiring.
Okay. So let me give our audience a understanding of some of the training within the U.S. So the General Police Academy can be from 10 weeks to 6 months, depending on where you're at in the United States, where the FBI gets 20 weeks. That's just baseline. The DEA gets about 18 weeks. So you can see that there's a disparity in training amongst the different law enforcement aspects, where the DEA and the FBI are pretty similar. But the police academy, it's interesting how just some of them get between 10 to 6 months of training, and they expect them to just go out and start to be a guardian, as you say. I believe in California, they were creating new rules where the average policeman or policewoman needed to have a bachelor's. Do you think that that's going to really change anything because they get a bachelor's?
Well, I think it changes the ability for the police officers to have the ability to be more analytical and to be able to assess situations a little bit better. But that is not the end-all answer, because depending on what community you're in, you may not be able to draw that college-educated person just because of the salary. But there are guys who have not been to college who have the ability to become excellent police officers.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned training. it's not only how much training they're having, but it is what type of training and who's giving that training. Mm-hmm. Now, Donnie mentioned that we want them to transition from the warrior mentality to the guardian mentality. And he acknowledged that to do the job, you still have to have a percentage of your time being a warrior, because that is the survival that you have to have. But if you ask 10 officers what's their job, 9 out of 10 of them is going to say, my job is to enforce the law. Mm-hmm. Enforcing the law is just a small part of their job, very important part of their job. But their real primary job is to protect the rights of the citizens in their community. Mm-hmm. The constitutional rights of the people that they see every day. That's their job. So we spend a lot of time on firearms. We spend a lot of time on, handcuffing, all the things to keep them alive. But we need to spend more time and giving them the tools on how to interact with people. Mm-hmm. Because as you know, as we go up different generations, certain generations now are more they focus more on technology, and their people skills have lessened. Mm-hmm. So now we do need to incorporate doing basic things as having general basic conversations between two people. And that allows a police officer to go out in the street and know who the people are in their community. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we want to teach them, is how they approach the people in their community will determine what type of information they get to help them do their job, mm-hmm. to keep the people in the community safe.
So I'm interested in the factor that, so you take the 3E group, you go to a big city like, let's say Baltimore, Maryland, or you go to Orlando, Florida, a smaller city. What is your teaching going to be like in those two different environments?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Anthony, and we've discussed this ad nauseum as a team. And so those are two different cities, and with two different and many sets of different issues. And so mm-hmm. we want to study the landscape before we go there. Get to know the city, get to know the demographics, the people who are living it, the crime. What the police department is composed of, and what kind of issues are they having. And so that question, one city can't be compared to the other. And I do want to go back to a little bit I was talking about, and you talked about the police academies, and some are long and some are short. And so, to be an FBI agent or a DA agent, two of the agencies that you mentioned, you have to have at least a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to speak for my colleagues here, but the education that I had joining the FBI, over, I guess 30 years ago now, I'm telling my age here, I don't know if it would allow me to be hired today. And so all that's changing as well. But when you allow, in some states and some municipalities, small departments, men and women to come on with a minimum of a GED education, and you're paying them minimum wage, that's what you're going to get. And Robert hit it on again, that we want people who can think and be agile and who can pivot from being a guardian into a warrior. And a lot of our folks, they just don't see that. Mm-hmm. And I want to go back a little bit earlier. And Robert hit on a very good point as well. This is not a beat up to the police, because no civilized agents or no civilized nation can exist without good police officers. And overall, the landscape out there is good, but we just have some things that need fixing. We need to move from the 20th century to the 21st century. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And one of the things I'd like to add is that you mentioned the word training or teaching. That's what the good thing about 3E is, that we're not there to train or teach them. We're there to coach them. One of the things that we will do is give them a pre-engagement survey. And that survey will allow them to tell us what issues they've identified within their own organization. And from that survey, we will go in and have tailor-made coaching sessions that will give them practical exercise that will address those issues and allow them to work through their own. We will coach them through their own issues so that they can come up with their solution based on what they need, based on what they've identified, and based on what they would call success. So that's what separates us from some of the other organizations that are going out doing training with police departments, is that we're there to coach them through issues that they have pointed out themselves that they have, and then we work them through it.
Okay. So what about holding them responsible? Like if you do a check-in after 6 months, 12 months, 16 months, and you're checking in with their department to see, almost like you're the coach, but you're still holding them accountable, more as a mentor, a continued mentor.
That's a very good question and a very good point, Anthony. And so that's the whole part of the coaching, is that as Robert stated, we let them set the standards and we let them set goals that they want to meet, and then during a 6 month or 8 month or 12-month interim, we check back and say, how's it going? Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't get here. Well, why didn't you get here? What caused that? And what can we do to get you back on track? Mm-hmm. And so coaching holds the coachee, or the person responsible for their progress on how they're moving forward, either the individual or the group.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
And Anthony,
yep.
To piggyback on that, what really separates 3E also from maybe some other training components out there is the fact that in order for us to be able to do those check-ins, when you go back and you reach back out to the command structure, either the chief or the deputy chief or somebody in the management to get an understanding as to where they are, what progress are they making. The thing that really drives what wants or makes these departments want to change is the training that they go. They have to respect and understand that the men that are training them understand the culture. Not only do we understand the culture based on the fact that we all have almost 30 plus years of law enforcement training at various levels, so we have a good measure of understanding what's out there, what's been done. We've already done some of the legwork. So I think when you do those check-ins, the good part about that is, do those departments have buy-in? If they have buy-in, and we'll know that as we start to work through our training apparatuses, if they have buy-in to what we are teaching them, that enhances and evaluates and catapults them into making sure that they change their culture. That's what makes those check-ins a lot more successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and Anthony, let me just add one thing.
Sure.
That kind of puts this thing a little bit in perspective, I think, as it relates to training. Police officers, police budgets, some agencies are large, are huge, and some are small. And budgets is a big deal. And they, right now we want them to make coaching become a part of their budget. Funding money for groups like us to come in and coach them. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the police leadership, but hey, where they get the purse strings from, the city councils, the county commissioners, all those folks, as well as the citizens. All we're trying to do is help them build the agencies they want for their community.
Mm. Okay, great.
Now, Anthony, one of the things is I want to make that's very important is that we're going to ask the hard questions, the race relationship questions. The beauty about this last year is that it's given us a lot of material to be able to bring scenarios to them. We'll be able to take past events and say, for example, we'll break the group out into 3 or 4 teams. Each team will be assigned a different role. One team will be assigned to be, say, for example, the Capitol Police. Mm-hmm. Another group will be the leadership for the Capitol Police. Another group will be the protesters. And what we want to do is have them work from the different sides and say, if you were in this position, what would be your mindset as you're going through this? How would you address it? And what are you thinking at the time? Mm-hmm. So each scenario will allow them to answer and ask the hard questions.
Okay.
And that's our job as a coach, is to be able to come up with scenarios, practical exercises that puts them in a position where they have to address that issue amongst themselves from different perspectives.
Okay.
And you will find that some of those officers will realize that, you know what, I never thought of it that way. I never looked at it from that side. And we also need, nowadays, you can't expect upper management to only be engaged with the community. When we say community involvement, the officers on the street need to understand that they have a role too, and their role is easier than the management. If you are you work a certain area, why don't you know some of the store owners, the people that are in that community? Get out of your car. Even if you just have to go use the bathroom, take that opportunity to go into that store, introduce yourself to that person in that store, that owner, or the person walking behind that desk, and make it a habit to go do that at least once or twice throughout your community. And over time, your community will know who you are.
Thank you for tuning in to this special two-part episode of Defund or Retrain the Police. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that you've learned a lot on why we think it's best for coaching and retraining our law enforcement community. They need our help and they need our funding. We can do better, and we are better as a people. Tonight you learned about the 3E group and how they are set out to help the law enforcement community become better and to make themselves and their community safer. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week.